there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? They said, the president's just been sent, President Johnson has been sent this 3-page document of things you've said about him in the last year. And it turned out Nigel Farage had dinner at Mar-a-Lago 3 days before, had gone back to London, had prepared, and bear in mind the same Farage who, when he got a Trump interview, I texted him congratulating him on his scoop. This is a guy who then hears I've got one, goes back to London, sends Trump a 3-page dossier of all the worst things I'd said about him.
Uncensored, and it features an interview with former President of the United States, Donald Trump, and Piers Morgan has come all the way in to see us in our studio. Second time for you.
Can I just say how excited I am to discover that the coffee being served in your building today, and I know Stig is particularly pleased about this development, is actually got my head on the froth. Genuinely, it's me.
That sounds all wrong.
None of it sounds right. But Stig, I'm assuming
it looks a bit blurry and a bit weak chin. So I think it's definitely Piers Morgan. I can confirm that.
I mean, that is just uber branding.
Can I also congratulate both of you on doing 4 hours of this a morning? Because I did 2.5, and it nearly killed me over 5 years.
Oh, you're
so
still
you
here.
have my deepest sympathies.
Thank you.
You're both weathering a lot better than I do. I have to say. Well, you are.
Well, oh, bless you. It's only been 2 years. That's why. Talk to us in 20. So tell us about the new show. Why is it called Piers Morgan Uncensored? What on it is going to be uncensored?
Well, I know the first thing Stig will say is, come on, you're not censored, you're not cancelled, you're not any of these things. To which I simply say this. If that was true and I wasn't cancelled or censored, I'd still be doing Good Morning Britain, which was a show I loved, which I'd trebled the ratings in 5 years, made it the most talked about morning TV show, beat the BBC on our final day and so on. I would still be doing that show. I mean, let's be crystal clear. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I was genuinely removed from that show because of external pressure from Miss Markle to the boss of ITV saying that she had to get rid of me. And then the boss of ITV concluding that they would put me in a position where either I apologised for a genuinely held opinion that I didn't believe what she was telling Oprah Winfrey, or I had to leave. Now, that to me is the personification of cancel culture, only beaten actually by what then happened to my Talk TV colleague Sharon Osbourne, who then got fired from the Talk in America simply for saying on Twitter that I was entitled to my opinion.
Yeah. But both you and Sharon Osbourne are still employed,
Yeah,
so
but
therefore you're not cancelled.
Cancel culture is not about that. Cancel culture is about losing a job you love. Let's be clear. It's not about you never work again or that you can't do media interviews about what happened to you. And, you know, it happens up and down the whole stratosphere of society now. And, you know, let's take one story. The Professor Kathleen Stock down in Sussex, which is where I grew up. So I followed it with a lot of interest. That to me, again, is somebody not famous, but who became kind of infamous, who was really treated in a medieval, barbaric way, simply for standing up, in my opinion, for women's rights. But whether you agree with her or not, she's a professor who wanted to explore these things at university. And we now have a culture at universities driven by this cancel culture mentality, where you're simply not allowed to have a view that deviates from the view that's been agreed by the woke brigade. And I think that's unhealthy for society. When professors get removed in the way that she did with a disgusting campaign against her, I think that crosses a line.
So are you totally free now, though? Because you've called this show Uncensored.
Yeah.
But it is a show with commercial realities to it. They're paying you
And we're Ofcom regulated.
Yeah.
And they pay you a fortune.
But bear in mind, Ofcom did find in my favour about the Good Morning Britain thing. So I've never actually had an Ofcom ruling against me. I think I know where the line is my point. And of course there are lines in free speech. You know, in America, which has the First Amendment and has one of the greatest free speech systems in the world, you can't go into a theatre and shout fire, famously. So of course there are limitations. I don't want the right to go on radio or television and scream racist abuse or hateful bigotry or inspire people to violence. That is not what free speech is about. But do I want the right to be able to say to you, Stig Abel, I don't believe a word you're saying right now? Yes. Should I be allowed to in a democracy? Absolutely. Should you be able to say, I think Piers Morgan's one of the most useless cretins ever born in the history of planet Earth? Not that you ever would.
No, you're on production meeting.
You are entitled. I got the note.
Sounds very familiar.
I got the notes. But you know, my point is, we should be able to have a vigorous, lively debate, and we should be able to insult each other. By the way, but I think we know where the line is, and I think that there are systems in place with regulation and so on which dictate that line, and that's fine. But ultimately, I think opinions, people should be allowed to have them.
Have we lost the nuance in the debate, though? Because even when you mentioned the word woke, and
Yeah.
woke is a term that we kind of half understand what it means. But,
I read a book about it last year.
I know you did.
And actually, I understand very clearly what woke was supposed to mean. So woke in the 60s arose through black music, actually, originally. And it was originally intended to mean that you were alert and aware and wanted to promote a debate about social and racial injustice. That's what it meant. And I sign up to that. By that criteria, I'm as woke as you get, because I spent my entire career as a journalist actually promoting equality.
I was going to say,
fairness.
both Stig and I, but we're a bit worried that we might be woke, aren't we, Stig?
Well, I think by that definition, we all ought to be woke. There's nothing wrong with being alert to social and racial injustice. But what has happened, and I think this is indisputable, and why I think it's such a malevolent sort of cancer on society now, what has happened is that this woke brigade, I call them that for want of a better phrase, but these are the ultra woke element who seem to dominate the debate, dominate social media. And they have decided that it's down to them to decide how the rest of us are allowed to think, how we can talk, what we can find funny, what comedians are acceptable, what statues we can revere, what parts of history we have to be ashamed about, and so on and so on. It's relentless. It's an assault on our senses, and it's fundamentally an assault on our free speech. And I'm simply saying with this show, enough of this. I think the vast majority of people in this country, certainly in Britain, certainly in America, I think, do not buy into this mindset. They want to have fun again. They want to go back to the way things were, not because they want the right to be disgustingly racist. They want the right to be able to express themselves without somebody going, you're going to get fired for that.
And no one, we'll talk about your first interview with Donald Trump in a second. So can you confirm now, no one has the power to tell you what you can say on this show?
Oh, Rupert Murdoch does, because he's the boss.
Yeah.
He has the power to tell you what to do as well, so we better all be careful. No, look, of course you have employers, and they can make their own minds up. I just suspect that if Meghan Markle was to write a letter to Rupert Murdoch demanding my head on a plate after tonight's first show, it's not going to go very well. So I think you need to find employers who have balls, frankly, of steel, because this is a mob mentality, and they do target the bosses.
Okay.
And they do it very deliberately to try and make sure that people like me don't get on the airways.
Now, you're a powerful man, whether you want to admit it or not. Did it irk you a bit that actually Meghan Markle exerted some power over your career?
Well, I thought it was a great pity, actually. I mean, bear in mind that I was employed by ITV specifically because I'm opinionated. I mean, the trailer music advertising my joining Good Morning Britain was sympathy for the devil. So I think people knew what they were getting. I was unashamedly opinionated, but so was Susanna Reid, my co-host, who I loved and really miss working with. And Susanna would often play the yin and yang with me. I would say one thing. I'd say I hate vegan sausage rolls. She said she loved them, and so on. And it was good knockabout stuff. And on the day, in fact, the infamous day, I was the only one on the show saying I didn't believe Meghan Markle. Everybody else apparently had the absolute right to believe everything she was saying, even though I knew certain things were immediately not true.
Maybe it's just the way you said them.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologise for my manner. I mean, my
No,
manner
You don't have to apologise,
No, but
but
my
maybe moderate it.
Again, my manner was very popular. If it wasn't, those ratings wouldn't have gone through the roof. People were tuning in because they wanted to either agree with me or be angry with me. Whatever it was, I was engendering emotion in people about debate in the public world, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay, let's talk about Donald Trump.
Yes.
What's your relationship like with him? I can't quite work it out.
Little testy.
Did you actually have a little fight?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was pretty. I mean, the whole day was sort of bizarre because I got there. I was surprised he agreed to do the interview because I was very critical of him in the last year of his office over coronavirus, over George Floyd, over the election supposedly being rigged, over January 6th. So I've been hammering him in columns repeatedly and on the airwaves. So I was surprised, but he agreed. I went down to Palm Beach to Mar-a-Lago, his big estate there. And we had it all set up. We'd flown in this crew. We had it all looking beautiful. And literally about 8 minutes before we started, I get a visitation from his people. Piers, there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? They said, the president's just been sent, President Trump's just been sent this 3-page document of things you've said about him in the last year. And it turned out Nigel Farage had dinner at Mar-a-Lago 3 days before, had gone back to London, had prepared, and bear in mind the same Farage who, when he got a Trump interview, I texted him congratulating him on his scoop. This is a guy who then hears I've got one, goes back to London, sends Trump a 3-page dossier of all the worst things I'd said about him.
Shouldn't
in the
Donald
last
Trump
year.
have known that?
Well, I think he knew some of it, but not quite the full
He always
scale.
he wasn't interested in you, Piers. That's the problem. He didn't know.
Well, he actually
care.
unfollowed me on Twitter when I
Blimey.
told him to stop spreading his back. crazy coronavirus stories. But the bottom line, anyway, was that this created a fractious atmosphere. He read all these comments to him in his office. It all got very testy. And when we got on air, it was kind of like a simmering volcano. So when we get, it's a long interview. It's like 75 minutes. Yeah. When we actually, and there's a lot of it's very interesting, revealing, and fun, actually. And today you see the royal stuff. He's classic Trump. But when we get round to the election, and I say to him, I do not believe that election was anything but fair and that you did not have it stolen and rigged. He loses his rag. He keeps calling me a fool, says I haven't studied it. I link it directly to the January 6th riots and said, I think there was a direct link here. He says, well, then you're a fool again. And it all gets very fractious. And right at the end, I won't give away exactly how it all goes down, but he tries to leave a few times and eventually he gets up, said, turn the cameras off and walks off sort of growling at me, so dishonest.
Okay. So you're not in you don't have the kind of relationship where you could say to him that his, whatever it is he's putting on his face is making him look mad. This is a genuine question from a listener.
Well,
have you ever been in that position with him where you could have said to him, Donald, in an interview, close up, you look mad?
Well, he did. He was more concerned that he thought his hair looked great. Honestly, when we sat down, he said, I think my hair looks great. I think he's more worried always about his hair than about his... Yeah, it's a weird little thing he has. But as long as his hair's good, he's good to go. If the hair's not right, he doesn't start.
Were you wrong about him, Piers? Because a lot of the stuff that you just said, that last year, COVID, it was all hiding in plain sight. We knew the man. You knew him better than most people. You'd worked with him. Even from a distant observer, you could tell temperamentally he had serious problems with being president. Do you think you gave him too much of the benefit of the doubt for the first 3 years?
No, I think I tried to do what I think all journalists should do, and that is be fair and impartial. I wrote about 120 columns about Trump when he was president. Half were critical, half were supportive. I felt that was probably a more balanced view of him. I think with Trump, he's an interesting character where if you take away the rhetoric and the tweeting, it's interesting. Apparently, independents are finding themselves drawn back to him because they're not exposed to his hourly tweets. Yeah. So not being exposed to his gob, frankly, makes him more presentable to people.
It's very rich coming from you.
Well, of course, probably the same applies to me. But I always say to my liberal friends, and I skew slightly to liberal. I said, look. There was a totally different dynamic about the way someone like Barack Obama got treated. So Obama deported, for example, 3 million people from America. He's known as the deporter-in-chief in Mexico. Far bigger deportation rate than Trump ever had. He put people in steel cages and so on and so on. He separated families. Nobody knows that because the media didn't care. They cared about Trump because they felt he was a kind of demonic figure. But actually, when you look at that, when you look at Obama's record on drone strikes, you look at his record on dropping bombs, you look at his record on keeping Guantanamo Bay open, I could present a pretty compelling reason why Obama's not the saint. Yeah. I could also present a position with Trump where a lot of what he did was quite effective. And one of the interesting parts of the interview is when he is insistent that Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if he'd still been president. I think it's a really interesting question. He felt he had this relationship with Putin and Kim Jong-un and the others. He talked about a moment, it's a great moment in the interview where he saw Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-un says to him, I've got a red button on my desk. And Trump turned to him and went, I've got a much bigger red button on my desk. Yeah. Now, it's the ultimate willy waving of two world leaders. But you sort of think, well, North Korea didn't pull any stunts when Trump was in office.
It didn't stop its nuclear proliferation either.
It didn't, no, but he didn't pull any. He didn't start anything. And I think the interesting question is, does somebody like Trump, who believes in personal relationships with these dictators, is that a more effective way of keeping them in their box than someone like Biden, very conventional, 50-year politician, sees Russia as the enemy? Did the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the catastrophic way it was handled, did that send a message to Putin that America was weak? I don't know, but these are interesting questions.
Just finally, to kind of bring everything up to date on the day's news, the Angela Rayner story, this briefing from a Tory source that she apparently crosses and uncrosses her legs at PMQs to distract Boris Johnson. You used to edit a tabloid. Is there a difference with your decision on whether you would have run that story 20 years ago and today?
Well, I don't really understand why the paper's getting the flak. It's whoever the Tory MP is the problem, right? If a genuine Tory member of Parliament said that, which I don't doubt that is the case, or why would the Mail on Sunday have run it? I just find it extraordinary that he's not, or she, whoever it is not, I presume it's a
because we
man.
don't know who it is. That's why, isn't it?
Sorry?
We, the general public, don't know who it is.
Right. So, but my point being, that person should be the focal point, I think, of all the criticism. It's clear, if it's been said, if a Tory MP is genuinely wandering around saying that, I have to say also, honestly, I think it's been slightly overblown, the whole thing. I think Angela Rayner's a tough cookie. I think that she can perfectly handle herself on this. And I think it sort of plays into my mindset again about there's sort of the rapid fire virtue signaling that goes on. Every member of the government sending out exactly the same worded tweet and stuff. It's all nonsense. And unfortunately devalues the merit of what they're saying. I would let Angela Rayner fight her battles, both with that idiot Tory MP, whoever it was, and also with Boris Johnson.
But there are people who say that puts off other women going into politics because they think they're going to be scrutinised by what they're wearing and what they're doing with their legs.
Well, men get scrutinised exactly the same way. I've never bought. Yes, absolutely.
I've never seen any
you don't think Boris
male
Johnson,
MP's
you don't
legs.
think you've literally just been hammering Donald Trump about his appearance. You've literally done it on air 5 minutes ago.
His orange skin.
Yeah, exactly. Terrible orange skin. If I said about a female politician, you go, how dare you be so sexist? You see how this works?
I accuse Boris Johnson of being the world's least successful jogger all the time.
Yeah.
We see pictures of him all the time. He never gets
He gets bigger and bigger the more he jogs. Who does that happen to?
No, you are right, but none of that's sexual. Is there a difference?
Possibly, but I do think that there's just a complete double standard, in my opinion, about the way this all gets treated. I think that male politicians, from Boris to Donald Trump to others, Macron with his hair, you called him hairy this morning.
Yeah, he did.
So
He's
I think we are very easy
Macron.
to objectify the way that male politicians look. The moment any woman has any mention of that, and let's be clear, some female politicians deliberately glam themselves up. Let's be clear, we know that.
Well, what do you mean glam? What does that mean?
Some would like. I'm not going to name names.
But when you say glam,
Don't
what do you mean?
censor yourself, Piers Morgan. Who?
There are certain female politicians around the world who I would say make a virtue of being good looking. What's wrong with that?
For people who are listening to on the radio, we'll put some videos out, but I can confirm that Piers Morgan has poured his curves into a very fetching black jumper and shirt ensemble today.
I can't believe you did
Wearing
that.
a bit of French in celebration of Macron today, which I think was quite a relief for all of us, wasn't it? That Le Pen didn't get
You've got to go. I don't need to ask this question, but I will. You're excited. You're excited about
I
doing
am
this
like
again.
a caged animal ready to be unleashed. Yeah, because I think
You've never been caged.
I think the show's going to be great. I think it fills a void in this country where people are crying out for a bit of common sense about all this woke cancel culture nonsense. I'm going to be the knight in shining armour, racing to the rescue of the nation. And we start with a corker of an interview tonight where you see Donald Trump lose his rag. What's not to love?
Piers Morgan, the ego has landed.
Yeah. He's uncaged.
We're very glad you came to speak to us
Uncaged and
today.
uncensored.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Really good to see you guys.
Great fun. You can watch the long-awaited return of Piers Morgan. Here's how you do it. Piers Morgan Uncensored every weeknight at 8 o'clock. He debuts with Donald Trump, the orange Donald Trump, as we've been discussing. The new channel launches at 7 with the news desk fronted by some bloke called Tom Newton-Dunn, and a new hour-long panel debate show, The Talk, featuring Sharon Osbourne, follows at 9 p.m. each weeknight. As a gotcha question, Piers Morgan, before you go, how do you watch it? Can you remember the channels?
Yes,
all the
I can.
numbers, go on.
526 on Sky, I know that.
Well done.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
526 on
Total
Sky,
gotcha.
and then the rest of it you can all get from my Twitter feed, from the if you go to talk.tv, and everything's on that site.
Exactly.
So that's the best way to find it, because you can also watch it on the app, you can watch it on YouTube. There's all different ways to watch it, and of course this show is also airing around the world, in Australia and America every day. So it's exciting.
Absolutely. Piers Morgan, thank you very much.
Good to see you.